Hey entrepreneurs, today we're sitting down with Erik Dodier, the co-founder and CEO of PixelMEDIA. He started his company over 28 years ago as a two-person multimedia company in his own apartment to now a 400-plus person firm. His business focuses on helping brands launch, manage, and grow their e-commerce business on Salesforce.com. In this episode, we learn about the multiple pivots that PixelMEDIA was forced to take to not only keep up with ever-changing technology of the past 30 years, but also to simplify and focus his business on the area that his company could create the best market share and equity value. Here's my good friend, Erik Dodier. Erik, thanks for joining us today. I couldn't be more excited to have this conversation. I remember, talking with you a little bit before we started this podcast a couple of years ago, thinking about what I wanted to do in terms of learning myself with entrepreneurs and helping other entrepreneurs. And, over the past few years, that I've gotten to know you, a lot of respect for what you have built with your company, how steady-handed you've been and the moves you've made in your business, and can't wait to jump in and just learn a little bit more about what was going on through your mind through the years of growing your business over 28 years at PixelMEDIA and all the learnings you've had within that. So welcome to the conversation today.
Yeah, no, thank you, John. Appreciate it. And good to see you, Rich, too. I've been following what you guys are up to and glad to be a part of it. So
glad you're here.
Where do you want to start?
Awesome. Well, I think we should ground everybody, real quick. Give us a little bit of the Erik Dodier, 2 or 3 minute background of where you came, school, out of school, and then you started PixelMEDIA 28 years ago. So what you did prior to that is maybe not as relevant as to what you've done through it, but give us a little bit of history of who PixelMEDIA is, who you are, and we'll start from there.
Yeah, sure. And I'll try to cut it off so we can, 28 years is a lot, but I'll give it to you in chunks, and we can kind of go back and look at specific parts. But in essence, I'm from the Northeast, north of Boston, in the seacoast of New Hampshire, where I'm actually sitting now. Went to the University of New Hampshire and went to one high-tech company prior to starting PixelMEDIA, and it was a very entrepreneurial company, and it kind of got me motivated. I'd always had kind of that entrepreneurial spirit and roots, and read Inc. magazine when I was 15 and 16, and where all the fastest growing companies were. So I think those are early things when I look back that were kind of indicators of maybe what I would do. Mm-hmm. And in 1994, multimedia and multimedia computers were kind of getting popular, and people had them more. And I ran someone at the company we were doing these multimedia presentations, and I thought, hey, we could do this for other businesses, and it was in the tech industry. And really, what PixelMEDIA was to start was helping companies put little mini presentations, animated presentations on demo diskettes at the time, or diskettes and floppy disks, and then CD-ROMs, and kind of mail them out. And so instead of just a brochure, you'd have this little interactive vignette. Quickly, though, we know 95, 96, the web really just took over. So we just pivoted our business to the web because it was really just another delivery mechanism, right? Instead of doing design and development and coding and putting on a little mini CD or diskette, you put it up on the web. And my business partner learned HTML over a weekend. And so it was really myself, my business partner, Thomas Aubry. I was the sales business guy. He was the delivery guy. I didn't want his job. He didn't want my job. So it was kind of a good unmatched, right? We had the different personalities, different styles. And that's how we started. And then
that's awesome.
Just really grew the company and evolved it through all the evolutions of the web and technologies. For the next 15 years or so, being kind of a broadly based digital agency is how I would describe us. Mm-hmm. In a professional services business. The challenge with that is you almost become too broad. You're doing too many things and you're not as focused. So gradually I started to see what other firms are doing and kind of where we were having a few chinks in what we were doing. And what happened is people were starting to specialize. The ecosystems had grown enough where you could specialize in a single area and get really good at it. So I'll summarize this real quick and then we can backtrack. We ended up landing in e-commerce, specifically e-commerce, on a platform called Demandware, which was a Boston-based e-commerce tech platform. We became a partner. They worked with medium to large brands like Company Store, Skechers, Vince. So medium to large brands, Bauer Hockey. Mm-hmm. And then Salesforce bought Demandware, and that kind of propelled us into the world of Salesforce. Mm-hmm. Of course, Salesforce has huge momentum. They needed all the professional services and power and partners they could get their hands on. So that put a very big growth trajectory on what we could do in a very specialized area. So you talk about 20 years of bumbling and fumbling through business and learning everything you can to 5 or 6 of being super focused and narrow. And I can tell you we've made more. You talk about enterprise value creation and what we've done. We've done more in the last probably 3 to 5 years than we probably did in the first 20. So
that's amazing. That's awesome to hear, and congrats on all that. And you and I have talked about this before, but I get a huge chuckle / smile / regret when I think about looking at the Salesforce.com website in 2005 for one of my businesses and deciding to do a free trial and test out the platform and not investing $1 in their stock, just kind of using their platform and seeing what it is today and how much they've grown and how powerful that tool is. And we're just regretting that I never invested money in their stock.
Yeah, we all have those stories for sure.
But you know, a lot of amazing stuff there. You know, one of the areas I'm definitely going to want to dive into is, you know, over 28 years, starting in your basement or in your garage with you and your co-founder and maybe one or two other people, to now I think over 400 people in your business, 28 years later. And the comment you just made, which is, you know, the enterprise value we created more in the last 3 to 5 years than we did in the first 25. And you sit here and you scratch your head and you go, wait a minute, 25 years to get to that sweet spot where you can actually hit in all cylinders. That takes patience, that takes perseverance, that takes a whole bunch of things. What did it take for you to kind of see it through, the good times, the bad times, the pivots, the this, the that? What was the key thing for you that kept you going in this entrepreneurial journey with Pixel?
I do think I enjoy the entrepreneur, you know, being an entrepreneur in a sense that, you know, it's problem solving effectively, right? You're just solving the next problem in front of you. And you know, the satisfaction. Now you're right. It is hard, right? It grinds on you after a while. But I also feel like at some point I like being a little bit more, you know, helping set the path for myself and others, you know, that we're kind of in this with together, is helping create something together. So I just like being in that position. And, you know, at some point you get so far into it after so many years, you almost feel like you're not employable really by a traditional way. So like, I got to keep this going now, right? In one way or the other. So it's a combination of just that desire to build something. And I've looked back on all the other side things I've done around Pixel, and involved in a startup bank, involved in a startup nonprofit, helped build a building at UNH and fundraise. It's always around startup and building. Again, you don't see these things when you're doing it. You only see it when you look backwards and go, there's sort of a pattern there. Yeah. I think I just gravitate to things that are about building and entrepreneurial. And that's what this is at its very best. Even when it's small at 50 people or 80 people, it's still, that's what it's about.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, you know, when you talk about starting with animated presentations, and I can't remember the last time I've heard the word CD-ROM, by the way, it's been a long time. You know, when you're talking to somebody who's talking about that, they started their business a long time ago.
Yeah.
But, you know, moving to the web and then moving to different products. And you mentioned something, you became too broad. And Rich and I talk about this a lot with different entrepreneurs on this podcast. And I certainly have been a victim of this myself, is as entrepreneurs, there's this shiny object syndrome of, oh my gosh, we could do this. Oh my gosh, we could do this. We might as well, if we're going to build software, we might as well build computers too. And then you start going all these different verticals. You start spread yourself all over the place. And then you're basically mediocre at everything. You can't really create market, you know, those kinds of things. How did you guys become too broad? Was that kind of the same example of being entrepreneurial? And then how did you have the discipline to say, okay, you know what, let's just go straight into this one box? How did that happen?
Well, I think when you're a services business and you're just starting out from scratch and you're 24 years old, you don't even know anything, right? So you're basically saying yes to the work coming at you that's somewhere in the range of what you can deliver on, partly just to get projects, get work, try new things, experiment with new, you know, just really to build any kind of business you can and kind of whatever comes at you.
Yeah.
So it's a bit determined by, okay, we're going to live in this digital creation space, so let's just do everything in digital creation. Now, there wasn't a lot of different tools anyway, so you just dabbled with everything that came along. So you didn't really know what was going to be the winner.
Yeah.
But by 15 years later, you say, well, now each of these tools has its own, you know, show and event and ecosystem, and we can't be experts at them all if we're still only 50 or 80 people, and we'd still been kind of growing very gradual. So the way we made the pivot is sometimes you got to just feel the pain, right? You've been around a long time, so everyone's coming to you saying, hey, we'd love to work, get a great reputation. And then we'd lose a deal. It's like, well, you guys are great, but we're going to work with this company because they're specialists. And you hear that enough to go, geez, we're not really specialists anymore. We used to be because we were new to that area, but we're not specialists. We're doing too many things too broad. So what I said to my partners, look, we're either going to decide what we're going to be good at, or our customers are going to decide for us. And if we let them decide, it's going to be a lot more painful and take a lot longer. So I said, why don't we look at ourselves, in introspective and say, what do we feel we're good at and best suited for? And we had this partnership around e-commerce. We said, those are our best clients. Why don't we just put all our energy into getting more of these e-commerce brands? Partly because what they would do is they'd finish their website and they'd sign a support contract, because e-commerce, they're insatiable. There's just more to do, more features to add, more payment process, or more payment types. Whereas a website you'd build, and it was almost like you'd hand it back to the customer and they'd be like, hey, we'll take it from here. So, and these aren't things that you can pick up. It's kind of, again, I think another skill of most time is pattern recognition. You see patterns that more quickly than maybe other people can pick up on. You go, okay, the pattern here is this. We have to navigate here. It doesn't happen that clearly, but you kind of bump your way there. So we landed in this e-commerce space with this platform, and my partner and I said, look, why don't we focus here? But before we announce it to the whole company, let's just put more energy into this, see if we can build more momentum, get it to, instead of from 20% of our business to 30, 40, 50%. If we can get to 50%, now we can say with some substance, this is where we're going. We're going to start to let the other stuff attrition away and stay focused here. So it was a bit of just kind of observing the tea leaves around us. Obviously e-commerce was trending up. It was, believe it or not, it was fun to work with big brands, Stonewall Kitchens and the Skechers and Red Wing Shoes. Like, oh, okay, now we're a partner. They're bringing us these bigger clients. So combination of things, and then just kind of paying attention to where your strengths are. And we were more tuned to bigger projects, more sophisticated projects than we were kind of smaller websites. So that's kind of the path we went down.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, Rich, it's the two words that come out of my mind when Erik just went through that is patience and focus on strengths.
Yeah. The word focus, I got to say, I must have used the word focus. I mean, it's probably the most used word I used to get to here from where we were. Like, we got to focus, we got to focus, we got to focus. And the more narrow, the better. Because at one point, there's going to be all forms of e-commerce, right? There's probably a dozen different e-commerce technologies out there too. We actually started down that and we said, no, let's just do one because this one's big enough to keep us busy and there's a lot of momentum, a lot of growth. You could also say it was, fortune goes to the bull. I mean, the fact that Salesforce bought the partner that we had gotten behind wasn't a bad coincidence.
Hey, you have to create your own luck sometimes.
That's right. So,
as you talk through some of the ebbs and flows of the 28-year business, it makes me curious to ask you about what are you most proud of, either in your journey or what you've developed as it stands today?
Well, certainly, the pivots we made along the way, which not all were as obvious as this one, but certainly there's several in there, and to sort of navigate those. So you're talking 94, you went through the tech bust in the 2000s, you went through the financial crisis in 2007, you went through, 13, 14 wasn't really a crisis from the outside. It was our own crisis of our identity, who we're going to be, right? And that's when we started making the decision. So pretty, some times that you kind of get weathered and you kind of build some scar tissue. The partnership with my partner starting PixelMEDIA, Thomas, and he goes by TJ. I mean, I can say to this day we're like, best friends from the standpoint of, we can discuss an issue, discuss a topic, and not necessarily agree, but that's just because we're trying to get to the best decision, right? It's not because there's any animosity, but that's been a strength of our partnership. Today, we've brought other companies into the mix, and we've got amazing founders now, which is why we're getting so much more momentum, that had started their own company, went on their own journey. Actually, some of them not that dissimilar to Pixel, just in complementary Salesforce areas. And what we've done now, and they went, and then they lived through all the same scar tissue that we lived through on their own, and we've now brought that together, and we're all now sort of the founders of what is becoming this new organization that's focused purely around multi-cloud e-commerce on Salesforce. And it's more than what we did. It's a broader view because Salesforce is sort of rounding out their commerce strategy, and we're building around that. So, many proud moments, Rich. I hope I hit a sum, but it's the relationships you build along the way. It's the decisions looking back that you didn't know for sure would that work out, and you sort of go, you're kind of proud that, okay, you did make a couple of good ones along the way. and just being in kind of an exciting industry of commerce. And but I guess I didn't mention going through COVID, the COVID time as well. That was kind of scary for a couple of months. A silver lining there is e-commerce businesses in general grew along with the service providers through e-commerce. So once the dust settled that, okay, life will go on, we'll get through this, it became almost a bit of a boost to the company.
I think one of the things you said was amazing founders. Were you referencing people who were employees at one time of your company who have moved on to found their own companies?
No, well, so originally it was just me and one co-founder in Pixel for the first 27 years or so. And then we brought in, which we probably can get to, some private equity in December of 20. And that's allowed us to bring in some other companies complementary to Pixel. And those founders have come along kind of for the ride as well. So I feel like we're all sort of, kismet in terms of we kind of lock arms. And it's a great relationship, not as long lasting as the original founder, but still as special because we've all lived the same journey. So we're just picking up at a different point. So it's kind of these new founders that we're now together with in this kind of new combined business, and which is what John said. That's how we've gotten from. So in December of 20, we were 85 people doing 15 million. We finished a year at 450 people doing 60 million. That's a big jump, but it was done through bringing some partners and some other businesses in. A company called Docmation that also does commerce on Salesforce, and a company called GearsCRM that does Service Cloud on Salesforce. So there are other parts of the Salesforce puzzle that we're kind of putting together for the end customer who kind of wants to get it all from one provider.
And as you add new founders, I can imagine there's a sense of positivity and excitement, and I expect this is going to go well. Otherwise, you wouldn't add new founders. But there's also an inherent risk to that. Can you talk to what are some of your business philosophies as it relates to adding founders that you leaned on in making decisions about which founders to add, and that gave you the confidence, hey, if they fit kind of these criteria, or if this decision goes through these type of filters of business philosophies, it's a good one. We're going to go with it. What are those business philosophies that you lean on?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Yeah, and then again, I should context, when I say bringing on founders, so these are founders of their own companies we're bringing together, but we're all rolling sort of equity into the new thing. So effectively, we're all the kind of the folks, and along with the private equity company. Well, a few things. Certainly, and I'm referencing now what I heard from John. I mean, we've taken our time, right? We actually, in terms of even the private equity partner, talking to the founders of the other companies. I do think I have a philosophy of kind of like attracts like, in that I don't think we'd be this founder group, this group of companies together if we first met and there was kind of a not such a great fit, right? You kind of instantly repel because maybe they have a different set of core values and so forth. So I do believe that if you continue the conversation, it probably means there's some common ground there. I do think there's an element of transparency, getting to know each other. Our businesses are aligned. Just relationship building that. It's a skill, right? I mean, you develop it over time of how to connect with people quickly and get to know them and let them get to know you and be comfortable sharing a bit about yourself. Because at the end of the day, if you share something and they don't like it, or then you probably shouldn't continue down that path anyway. So it's better to be more open and transparent than the alternative, because you're only doing yourself a disservice, right? So I think being a little more vulnerable, sharing a bit more about your background, just opens the door for people to say, hey, this is someone who I could be in business with for a long time. So it's kind of a bit of comfort with yourself, that be who you are, and then let the gravitational pulls of kind of people that will attract like kind of come together. Obviously looking out for your own warning signs, right? If someone's trying to pull something over on you, you got to pay attention to that too. But I think that just comes with time and experience and getting other people's input and other people's opinions, right? So don't try to make all those decisions on your own.
So I just want to recap that. 4 things I heard. Tell me if I missed something. One
Sure.
is, don't change who you are. Be yourself. Believe that like attracts like. If people are in your sphere, it may be for a reason, and to explore that more. And then you talked about transparency and shared values. As you hear those back, Do those resonate to you as your core philosophies?
Yeah, well, it does. And sometimes it takes someone to explain it back to you to really feel it, because, like, it's kind of like, I know what I do every day, but I probably couldn't teach it, like I couldn't turn into a course at a university, but it's like, you just get up every day and you kind of go about your day and you're doing certain things and you're interacting in certain ways. But these are skills, right, that entrepreneurs have and they acquire over time, even though they're very nuanced and sometimes they don't know exactly what's leading them down that path. But yeah, Rich, I think that's, you're kind of right on.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So I want to come back, Erik. One of the interesting parts, I think, of this story is that you became too broad, right? You had this generalist kind of business at some point. You face this identity crisis. You're like, okay, we need to focus. Let's get specialized. And you found where you want to specialize based on some successes you were having. And she became very specialized. And then you decided, we're actually going to go find a bunch of specialists and bring them all back together so we can actually provide a broad set of services. So you kind of like almost are going back, but now you're doing it with entrepreneurs, founders, we're calling them in this conversation, that have specialized all in their domain to bring different founders of specialization back together so you can provide a well-rounded service. It's kind of, what's interesting in that, I guess, is it's very hard for one founder with one business and one focus to accomplish it all. But when you bring everybody together to focus on different issues, it seems like you can. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it is. And obviously we're much bigger, we're broader, but at the same time, we are still today. I can still summarize today what we do in a sentence versus what I couldn't, back then. Even when we had 50 people,
yep.
When someone said, "What do you guys do?" I said, "Well, it depends on what you want." Today, someone says, "What do you do?" I say, "We do multi-cloud Salesforce services for e-commerce." And if you don't want that, we can't help you.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
That's a great. It feels good to be able to do that. And by the way, that world is huge.
Yeah.
So you kind of only need to expand so much, is that the addressable market is big enough for you to build your business around. And quite honestly, otherwise you said you drown in opportunity, right? We could expand into all parts of Salesforce, but you know what? People would then forget what we stand for and wouldn't know when to pick up the phone and call us versus the other 1,000 Salesforce partners. So we're staying kind of in this narrow space.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a clarity component with the focus in terms of team. I remember, years ago, I had brought you a project that I needed in the mobile app space, right? And your company graciously helped us with this product. And I can remember maybe a year and a half in or so when I called you about, hey, we need version 2 of this. You're like, hey, you should probably go over here, right? We're not specialized in this anymore. It's kind of when you were starting your pivot phase. And one thing you said to me then resonates with me now, which is, in addition to it being very hard to focus your marketing attention, because there's so many shows and there's so many different, if you're not focused, there's your team that lacks clarity on who are we? Like, what are we recruiting for? And you probably had a bunch of generalists on your team that weren't trained in any specific area. I'm sure that's assisted in that area as well, in terms of your team being specialists, in addition to your marketing message. Is that, I'm assuming that's a fair?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, John. It almost helps every other decision get easier because you know who you want to hire, you know what shows you want to go to, you know who your customers are, you take all this energy that's almost being lost and narrow. So it's almost like, it's the magnifying glass, right? It's like you take all that energy, just pinpoint it, and it's like it's so much more powerful than being sort of spread out. It doesn't even have an impact, right? Yeah. What show would we even go to back in 2010? There was too many. Where now I say to my team, just go to the Salesforce shows, because you can just trip over people that we're going to have an impact, whether it's a sales rep that wants to talk to us, whether it's a customer that's evaluating the platform, whether it's an existing customer that's there to visit on what's coming next. Now we go to some other commerce and so forth related shows, but it can get very narrow. But how you're recruiting, and again, like you said, John, the talent you're bringing in, exactly the talent you want to continue to bring on.
Yeah, well, focus, clarity, simplicity, it all comes into that. I have to imagine, though, and I could get this wrong, and it doesn't have to be exactly accurate, but you said, look, of 100% of our business, where we ended up specializing, we kind of had like 20% was kind of where we were focused, and then we kind of grew it to 50%. And we said, okay, now let's make the switch. How risky was this maneuver? I mean, because to pivot your
Oh,
business and say, we're going to focus on a business that really is only 20% of our business now, but let's just kind of focus on it and we grew it to 50%. Then you make this call. How aggressive did you pivot in terms of, and how risky was that for you and your partner?
it you're right. You're literally changing the engine on the plane while it's flying. I mean, literally. And the way we did it was, again, services, some, projects have a long tail to them. So, what we did is focus the outbound sales energy on bring on these new clients so that gradually we would sort of let the other stuff attrition away. Now, if stuff found us like, hey, can you guys do this project for us? Like if, John St. Pierre called and said, hey, can you do this? We had to make a decision. Is this good to do and get in and out the door for the money? Because that money is funding this transition.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it going to have a long tail on it? And by the way, are we weaning off those resources? We're going to have, an unhappy client. It's going to be around forever, and it's going to slow us down in terms of our pivot, right? So and those are hard decisions to make because you're sort of turning away work to create the opportunity for the new work.
Mm-hmm.
So it is hard, especially when your muscle memory is to say yes to everything that had been coming at you for the 15 to 20 years before that.
Yeah.
Even our own employees were like, yeah, this won't work. Eric and TJ, they'll just say yes to everything because they'll want to take the project, right? I mean, that's what they thought. I mean, and then they probably were right in thinking that until we proved otherwise.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is hard. It's hard to change our own trajectory. It's hard to change, the minds of the employees. What we landed on, somehow, you navigate these things. We landed on this phrase, helping lifestyle brands launch, manage, and grow their digital commerce. And that was kind of the first pivot tagline. And even that felt good, honestly, when we said it. It was like, that feels good. And the reason was launch was to get customers onto the platform. Manage was to do all the ongoing managed services, and grow was all the digital marketing optimization, help them grow the online revenue.
Yeah.
But what that also did, all my employees, all the staff time fit into those buckets. Even though they weren't doing it for all e-commerce clients, they were doing it for someone. And what we just said was, look, you still have a job. No one's losing. This pivot does not mean we still don't need you. You're just going to do it now for e-commerce clients. And so goes our specialization. So goes your specialization.
Yep. If
we're good at this and this works, your value goes up too, because guess what? You're now specialized. You're a heart surgeon, not a general practitioner, right? Sure. And that's just the way of the world these days is specialization. So yep. I'd say, 30% were already doing commerce, 30% wanted to go along for that ride. And there was a percent that said, hey, I like that other stuff we were doing. And they did offboard. Mm-hmm. But everybody offboarded kind of at their own pace and time. And we didn't have to do it for them. And that's fine. That's healthy. And that allowed us to bring in other talent that fit where we were going. So it just all worked its way in.
Got it. So for 25 some years, I don't know exactly when you partnered with an equity partner, but for 25 some years, you're running your business solo. You're like, okay, we're going to go, you get too broad, you pivot, recession, different things happening over that long period of time. At some point, you make a decision, you know what, maybe it's time to bring on an equity partner and put this thing on the, maybe put the pedal down to the metal, kind of, so to speak. How did that decision come about, and why did you make that decision?
So it came about because when we made this pivot, so now we became sort of this originally Demandware only commerce partner. We said, okay, we're going to build a lot more momentum around here. When Salesforce bought Demandware, what happened was a lot of the big Salesforce partners went looking for established Demandware partners to kind of round out their offering. Okay. So it created a little bit of a frenzy to like, how can they build that into their practice? And it's a buy versus build. So they basically said, we're going to go buy this 50-person partner and this one and so forth. But TJ and I were a little more like, let's keep running this thing out a bit. We got a lot more momentum and energy, and let's keep building it. So we sort of stayed just on our independent track, which is hard because these are big clients and they're going to sign on with a 75, 80-person firm. I mean, we're doing Skechers and these big brands. I mean, you got to really demonstrate your capability and your ability to deliver on that. But there weren't that many partners. This wasn't like a technology you can just kind of download the software and we'll become a partner. You had to go through a vetting process and do a project. And so that was good because in services, there's not a lot of barriers to entry. But in this particular area, there actually sort of was a little bit.
Yep.
But when that happened, we were kind of evaluating, okay, these partners are getting picked up by these bigger Salesforce partners. there's actually a market for our business now, right? But prior to that, we were just kind of this generalist services company. So this, we're like, all right, we got that on our mind. Fast forward a few more years, and we're like, this is getting, bigger than a bread box, and we could use some more capital to now build this out because it's getting bigger. Clients want this multi-cloud, and we just, it's time to sort of, after 25 years, if there's real value here, maybe there's time to take something off the table and then, push it forward. So we actually began a process in 2019. We're about to do something in January of 2020. We know what happened then, and everything went quiet. We just stopped the process, came back in June of 20, and after everything kind of settled in, we had grown the business by 30% in the year. So we're like, we were more valuable then. Interesting story. I would have thought we would have been bought by like a strategic or something, like a big player. But private equity came along and said, hey, look, you guys could keep building this out, be entrepreneurs, stay involved. And now that we'd grown at 30%, it was like, yeah, maybe now, we can put that off to the side, and it's still exciting. So that's what we decided to do. But in essence, we've been vetting folks for almost a year. So I had a lot of practice getting to know people, doing what I was talking with Rich about, share about myself. Do they like me? Do I like them? Doing that. And you quickly weed out who's not a fit. Either they disappear or you disappear, right? One or the other, you say, I kind of gravitate to these folks. And we landed with a great firm. They've lived up to everything. And they're the ones that's helped us execute, work bringing these other companies in. And so it's just been amazing. Yeah.
Sounds like a great partner. And so to make sure I understood what that was, when you came to the decision of, hey, we either have a choice, we can sell to a strategic, we've created enough value, we're going to sell to a strategic. And that basically means get an employment contract for a couple of years, but now you're an employee of another company. But going back to where you started, look, I'm an entrepreneur. I love being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
There was another option, which is, look, get some chips off the table, but continue to be an entrepreneur, continue to build. Because what else are you going to do, right? You sell your business, what would you want to start? I'd want to start PixelMEDIA all over again. This is what I love doing. So you made the decision to continue the entrepreneurial route and well-rounded out. So I love that story and I appreciate you sharing. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you're 3 years in now to this next era in your business, just 3 years in. So although it's a 28-year business, you're in this new era. What is your take on what is your biggest risk to your business today? Like, what keeps you up at night? What are you having to plan around? And then ultimately, how do you mitigate that risk or those risks?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Rich. And in fact, from the original starting the search 3 years, but in fact, in reality, the investment came in December of 20, so we're only like 14 or 15 months since that, and it's been a really great journey since then.
Yeah, so this is hot. This is new. Like,
it's amazing. Yeah, first of all, it's a whole new way for us to think about building a business for all of us, all the folks now involved, including myself, which is. Used to think about, hiring one person at a time. And now we've just assembled this really all-star group of capabilities, which we just call practices within the bigger company. And we've got shared HR and shared finance and so forth. So now every practice can rely on kind of a shared back office, but have their practice deep, have that deep domain expertise. And, but what keeps us up, certainly it's a talent war right now, and we're a people company, right? So we are a services business. We do build some IP around specific parts of Salesforce where there's gaps in the technology, so we invest in that. One of the groups, the Docmation team with Jay Prasad and Vikram, had a big operation in India, so that accelerated our ability to leverage an India team, which is just great to get more capacity, kind of follow the sun capabilities. But it's really having the talent at the right time, because these projects ebb and flow, and services is a tricky balance. You either have too much work for too few people, or too few people, for too much work. And it's like, it's never perfect. Or you have too many people and not enough work, right? So you're sort of always chasing one.
Is that a new risk though, Erik? Like, wasn't there a similar risk to that in the first 25 years?
No, yeah, you're actually right. You're actually right. No, that risk hasn't changed. I think now it requires just a little more foresight and planning. Back in the day, Tom and I could hire a person on Tuesday to start a project on Wednesday. Now you got to be way out ahead of your planning and budgeting and things like that. So kind of the sophistication of planning and resourcing and so forth.
So as you sit around as a founders group, and maybe you haven't done a SWOT analysis per se, but you're sitting around as a founders group, excited to get going. I get having talent goes on the threat list of the SWOT analysis. What else is on the threat list in this new era that's new to you that you're like, hey, this I didn't have to worry about previously, and here's a threat that's kind of new that we're gonna have to navigate.
Yeah. Well, just in general, the work that sells gets more sophisticated, right? So now you're talking about work that spans all three practices, where before we each knew our piece of the business, and that's all we did. So we knew our world. Now we're having to build a sort of shared PMO, shared practice that can kind of reach across everybody and kind of pull all that together, because we want it's got to be a common experience to the customer. When they're working with us, we can't have them jumping across the three practices. So kind of bringing that together. Navigating this kind of global talent is different, right? And how do you balance, the talent in the U.S.? I mean, it's just scarce. It's scarcity. So you're trying to reach across and find other parts of the world that you can build the talent teams in. But it's funny, Rich. In some ways, a bigger business is more resilient to the day-to-day blows, right? Because you're bigger. It's like a bigger boat in the ocean versus a small rubber raft, right? A bigger boat can take bigger waves and bigger things, and so you can focus on kind of the longer term. When you're small, and you also have a better team to put in place, right? You've got true professionals that you put into all areas: CFO, operations, and what that allows is, you as a CEO, you can really operate as a CEO. You can really operate as a leadership team because you've got really good people in place running things. Whereas before, in a small 50-person business, 80 people, anything that's not getting done, pretty much the founders jump in and do. Poorly, probably. So you're kind of always running around. So this, in some ways, as the business gets bigger, it's more resilient, and you can kind of weather more blows and kind of navigate a little more cleanly, through the rougher times. And you've got more mind share at the table. That's what I love about having all the other entrepreneurs at the table. They've lived a different set of experiences than me. We've all lived different things. When we come together with a problem, they go, "Oh, I've already got a solve for that," because they've already lived that one, and it just kind of accelerates the momentum.
Thanks for that. What's your take on your competition, and like where you rank in your competition? You don't need to name names. I'm just curious on where are you as it relates to your competition? How are you making sure you're staying ahead of those chasing you? How are you positioning yourself to take over those ahead of you?
So I think where we're trying to carve our path is by staying focused on this multi-cloud commerce on Salesforce, which still involves lots of parts of the Salesforce offering, but it always has sort of commerce at a core piece, because that's kind of our strength. So not trying to get distracted and let's just become the biggest Salesforce partner we can doing anything, right? Because that's what others have done and are doing. And then they just they're in the mix, right? Of whatever. No, they kind of lose they're still a Salesforce partner, but they've kind of lost what's their specialty, what's their identity in terms of within that ecosystem. So that's an important part. I think what your other question was about what we're doing to keep the competition kind of at bay. There is the company health, the culture. You do have to spend a lot of time on that, in conversations, getting to know people. We use a system called EOS, which is kind of a focused entrepreneurial, kind of system where it kind of drives just transparency, keep everybody informed on what's going on, give people an opportunity how they want to bubble up issues, how things roll up. It's kind of just it's an operating system essentially. And what it's really done is help us. Now Pixel used it, and we're starting to kind of look at it for the other groups and roll that out. But it's just a really great communication system so that your information is being shared, right? Because that's what you hear a lot is people feel like we don't know what's going on. Where are we going? What's the vision? What's going on? And we want to make sure we can always say, and we use some software to help drive that everybody should know what's going on at all times. It doesn't solve every problem, but it removes some of the chaos that can happen when you're trying to bring 400, 500 people, the human chaos, human capital together. There's a lot of room for missteps. And so the more you can kind of keep everybody grounded in what we're up to and communicate up issues, focus on the most important things, I find that to be a very healthy way, to manage a business.
Just out of curiosity, are you facilitating EOS yourselves, or have you hired an integrator to come in and do it with you?
No, we used an EOS implementer to help us roll it out, and that person stayed with us through some of the facilitation and so forth. But yeah, we got some outside help to put it in.
And are you using that today, or did you guys take it and you're running with it from now?
Well, I still like using this person to facilitate meetings, because I just think that's sort of facilitation thing, and they kind of keep reminding us of the core, of it's easy to get then distracted again and kind of go off. But this person is now getting involved to help us roll it out to the other organization. So in a way, he's staying connected to us, even though it's a little different. That we're not totally new to it. There's some folks in the business now that are new, so we're starting to kind of share that with them.
So in using the common language with you of EOS, can you share what's your 10-year vision that you have on there? Like what's the goal now? Where is this going for you?
Well, geez, it's so hard. You're right. EOS talks in 10 years. Unfortunately, still living in 3 to 5 for me is probably as far as you can realistically go, the way things move and change. But we want to be a dominant player. Reality is at 400 people, we're still pretty small in the big scheme. I mean, there's Salesforce partners with tens of thousands of practitioners, right? What's unique though is this area, because it emanated out of a third party, this other commerce area and a few other tools, this is still new to them. So in some ways, we're as up to speed as the biggest partner in this particular area. So we want to continue to build just around this core and be a dominant player here. And, it was one thing to get from, 100 people to 400 or 500. We kind of got our sights. How do we get to 1,500 to a couple thousand people and really maintain that focus and culture? And, you just have to look at the momentum Salesforce has. I mean, they truly are a force when it comes to sales. They know where all the opportunities are. And quite honestly, that's another interesting part is there's so much opportunity. We're typically less worried about where the deals and sales is coming from. We're thinking about how do we service it all, which is an interesting place to be from the first 20 years of running a business, where it's like, where do I get the work, keep everyone busy? Salesforce is really putting a lot behind this, and they help support a lot of the partner activity too.
So Erik, just for people who may not know, EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And how much of a factor was you? I'm assuming you may have heard about it, read the book, and then said, let's look at this a little further. Yeah. When was that relative to the major pivot? And did that contribute to the pivot, or that contributed to executing the pivot?
It more contributed to executing the pivot. It came around 2000, I want to say 2018 or 19, somewhere in there. And what was happening is, because we now had fallen into this really great opportunity, the chaos was sort of picking up, right? Because now you're trying to go faster, and now people are bumping into each other, and who's responsible for that, and who's responsible for that, and you hear this term of accountability chart and roles and getting good definition and vision. So now we had great core values. We had had a lot of that. We were also in the process of becoming more virtual as a business, even pre-COVID, because you weren't going to find all that talent, just up here in the Northeast. You had to kind of hire people wherever they were. So combination of being more virtual, not everyone in the office, going quickly, the wheel starts spinning really fast, right? And it's like, okay, how are we going to bring all this together? And I just happened to be on LinkedIn one day, and someone who I knew and trusted, who had been in the tech world, had said, hey, I'm starting a practice doing this EOS thing. And I'd heard of it. And I thought, all right, this guy's a pretty practical guy. I got to look into this. Maybe this isn't just another one of those, silver bullets that someone's talking about. Sure. When he rolled it out, it was such common sense business practice, accountability chart, scorecard, metrics, rocks, goals, have a common vision. I'm like, that's kind of the package, right? Sometimes and I've been a Vistage member in some of these other groups, and sometimes you get spot solutions, but hey, you should build your core values, or you run over and do that. And you should, do your 1-page business plan, you run over and do that. Yeah. This sort of connected it all for me. And we just kind of leaned into it. And everybody, honestly, COVID hit, within a year. Mm-hmm. And some people said, hey, they think that grounding in that a process with metrics and they said, that's what kept us. I said, hey, keep the metrics green. Doesn't matter where we are, where we're working, keep the metrics green. Let's work on our rocks, what most important things, and we'll come out the other end. And a lot of people felt like that really kind of grounded us in something versus before was much more loosey goosey, you know?
Well, it's also, you talk about, focusing on your strengths and clarity and simplicity. And it sounds like the EOS tool kind of gave you kind of a roadmap that could take it out of your brain, if you will, and your team's brain, and put it kind of in a roadmap that people could follow that made it simple for them and focused for them and clear for them. So it sounds like if you're listening to this as an entrepreneur and you're looking for that simplicity, you would recommend EOS. Is that a fair?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, there's so many other areas to go, but the one part that kind of resonates with me, and we talked a little bit about it before recording this conversation, is a few episodes ago we recorded from chairman to CEO, and I talked a lot about the tortoise versus the hare, and how it's very difficult for entrepreneurs in a short window of time, 5-10 years, to grow a business and ultimately become a growth business. Like, there's stages you have to go through your business, and crossing that chasm from a lifestyle business to a growth business where you're really creating value and for your stakeholders and for yourself is kind of a long journey that you have to have that patience and that clarity. It sounds like you took that tortoise approach, and part of that is having a very clear strategic plan. So it sounds like you're on that track there. So I love that. And what I know about you, Erik, and times we've dealt together, is you're very disciplined. You're very regimented. You kind of have, a very systematic system to you and how you operate as an entrepreneur and leader. I wanted to do a little bit of 5 speed round questions with you to dig into that a little bit, put you on the spot, test your skills here. So in one word answers or a sentence, answer these questions for me. What is the best, and you can't use Salesforce, what is the best, and you can't use EOS either, what is the best application on your phone or software that you use that you feel is a hack in terms of management of your business?
Hack or on my phone?
Phone or software that your company uses that really helps you manage your business efficiently.
For me, it doesn't feel like a hack, but it might be just my email. I use it almost as my to-do list.
Okay, perfect. But I'm going to dive a little bit deeper. Is there any specific way you manage your email that helps you be more efficient? You just mentioned that to-do list example.
Well, one thing I've started doing is, when I have a meeting on my calendar, I set up a parallel meeting next to it that's for me. And I put my notes in there, either leading into the meeting, in advance, or during the meeting, I'm typing my notes. Because I used to get lost in terms of where all my meeting, where all my thoughts go from that. And so what I've been doing is, so if I have a meeting that's with the people scheduled, I have a parallel meeting for me, and that's where all my notes go. Because I might not want to put all my notes in the meeting itself with all the people. And what it's done is it keeps a complete log of everything that's going on in that meeting. And when I'm preparing for the meeting, I had a parallel meeting to this to go back and check out your podcast. So I'd seen it before, a couple thoughts I had that came out of it. So when this was coming up, I said, "Oh, this is things I want to."
I love that. I love the way sometimes you're like searching. Okay, where are my notes? You have this conversation to put them right there in your calendar. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, I've known PixelMEDIA from visiting your office and seeing the pool table and the ping pong table and the cafe area you had, and obviously I'm sure COVID disrupted some of that, but you have definitely had cultures where when I talk to people who worked at PixelMEDIA, it's like, this is a great place to work.
Yeah.
What is the one biggest factor you'd encourage entrepreneurs to consider in terms of building a strong culture?
I think get those core values in the open, and kind of work them into things. When we started, that would be if you're looking for the one short words, I'd say get core values out to the surface and make them really special it's about the people. It's the things that already exist. It's not creating them for the most fanciest words. It's things that already exist in your company that the best people do all the time. And if you can describe what the best people do all the time, that's probably the core values that you want to see.
Love it. Okay. Thank you. Biggest business influence that you've had in your life?
I forget when it came out, this kind of law of attraction thing, but you started hearing that theme a lot more, and it's in all the other books too. It's in every book basically, but the theme of that really came to the surface, and that really helped me think about. It's just about where you focus your energy, and that's kind of what draws in. And you ask, how'd you stumble into these things? It's wherever your energy and time is being what you're thinking about just kind of draws certain solutions and answers to you for me.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't otherwise appear, like it's not clear to you until you start thinking about it consciously. So I was like, oh, it's like when you buy a Jeep and then you see 10 Jeeps driving down the road. It's in your consciousness, and all of a sudden, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Kind of.
Yeah. Rich, I forget what that's called. What's that called when you buy a Jeep and you see Jeeps everywhere?
Your reticular activating system.
There it is.
Yeah.
I knew you'd remember that. But yeah, okay, got it. Next one. If you had to do one thing over again as an entrepreneur, what would that one thing be?
I think I probably early on was a little more, was not as much myself, not as comfortable. And I think that just took a while to learn and get comfortable, and realize that you're not doing anyone any favors by trying to, position. And then once you really got comfortable, so I think it's just being comfortable being yourself and let that draw in, where you're going.
So be more vulnerable in your early years? Is that maybe?
I think so. I think so. Yeah. I think I tried to be a little more, carry a certain, just be a little more protected and guarded. And probably I still am to some degree. So let's face it, I'm not, but but a lot more when I get into certain environments. So.
I share that one with you. That's one thing that if I had to do it over again, I share that one. It is kind of be a little more vulnerable in my entrepreneurial years prior. Last one. What's the single biggest nugget of advice you would give an entrepreneur now that wants to grow their business and create equity value for themselves?
I truly will come back to this word focus, because one, the world has gotten so big and complex that you will get completely lost in the noise if you don't find something to zero in on. And something you kind of touched on, you can build from a focus. You can build from a position of strength. I mean, if you like we did, we found a focus, got really good at it, and now we're building onto it. You can't really do it the other way. You can't be super broad, and there's nothing really to build around. So just starting out with something super focused that you can find, I don't know if you said, but the riches in the niches or something. It's like you got to get narrow, find something you get really good at, and get known for that.
Love it. Well, Erik, thanks for coming on. Congratulations on what you've built. I can't wait to see where you take it from here now that you're kind of rocking with your businesses and the different founders and bringing this group together. So congratulations on all that. This was a fun conversation, and I look forward to tracking your success here. Thank you.
I appreciate it, John. Yeah, thanks for it. I feel like, John, we had the conversation we've been trying to have for like last year or so to catch up and have coffee, but now we just had it. So
I'll still do coffee.
Yeah, awesome.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode. Rich, pivot your business now and focus. Absolutely resonates with me. I know way too many businesses, way too many entrepreneurs. I have been there. You become a generalist. You say yes to everything. You go wide. You try and go deep in everything. And the next thing you know, your expenses are off the chain. Your marketing's off. You're just way off in so many different directions. Erik found this niche, specialized in it, focused on it, and created the most value in his business after 28 years by just focusing on that one niche that he knew he could be the best in the world at. Love that. And I think way too many entrepreneurs fall victim to this yes syndrome, the shiny object syndrome. And it's so important. So if you are an entrepreneur listening to this and your business isn't focused enough, and you probably can never get too focused, he said something along the lines of the more narrow, the better. I truly believe that, because you can be the best in the world in that narrow spot, and you'll really create value and actually simplify your life.
I'd love for you to expand on the idea of pivot now and focus. Like, as I heard you say it and I was listening and thinking and going, man, if that were a title of a keynote speech or a title of a book, they almost sound a little bit contradicting. Like pivot now. So like be disfocused from what you're doing and focus. And then there's almost a journey of businesses needing pivot and then focus and then pivot and focus. Like, how does that work? You've had more businesses and more pivots and required to focus more than I have. Like, how does that? How do you pivot and focus sequentially and actually be focused at any point?
Great question. I think the word pivot may or may not be the right word in the context of what I threw out. But if I was to take your challenge and answer it, in Erik's case, he didn't wake up one day and say, you know what? Don't worry about e-commerce. Why don't we open up a restaurant? Like he didn't pivot his business to something completely off chain. He pivoted his business model to simplify it and focus in one specific vertical that at one point was 20% of his business, but he had grown it to 50%. He's like, this is the way we're going to succeed here. Let's put all of our energy into this. And from a business model perspective, let's change our business model, i.e. pivot. Let's change our business model to get hyper focused in this niche. So I think the word pivot sometimes can be misleading because it sounds like you're completely changing. Whereas here, the pivot of the business model was, look, we used to say yes to everything, and now we're not. Now we're going to focus right here and simplify. So pivot, simplify, but there's no doubt that way too many entrepreneurs, if they look at their budgets or look at their plans for the year, like we're doing way too many things for way too many types of people. If we focus and narrow that down in, we'll be more successful.
I love that. And when you read a book or you listen to a podcast, it's kind of like sometimes you get what you need to out of it, and maybe you didn't hear everything, but you got what you needed to out of it. When you describe that and reiterated the idea of simplify, I can tell you that really resonates with me. Simplify and focus, because I can tell you for myself, on a scale of making things too simple or too complex, I'm generally on the complex end. And I think I could use some of the advice as you described it, however, from Erik, is to simplify and focus. And that is a key. Yeah,
true. And I think whether you use the word simplify or you use the word pivot, I think it's really important. And I think EOS may do this. We use a tool called the 3 to 5 year strategic planning, was more Rockefeller habits. You need to know directionally where you're going, and you need to revisit that on a frequent basis. And I love that we got to the fact that he's using the EOS system and software that goes along with it, and there's structure throughout the organization. Again, you seem to have a lot more experience in that than I do in terms of the EOS system. But knowing Erik and knowing other entrepreneurs out there that just like to have things very structured, way too many entrepreneurs go and they have a budget and they have financials, but they don't have any other tools that are assisting them with a roadmap. So I know of EOS. I have a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. Are there other tools that you're aware of? And how does your organization use strategic planning? Do you do the same process?
There are a lot of tools that are out there and available, and I think it depends on the individual. And the individual's preferences. If it's somebody who has a high preference for self-structure over external structure, if they have high idea orientation, maybe high abstract reasoning, so they like complex issues, that person should probably look at 4 or 5 of them and make their own. Because you're never going to find one that you like if those are your preferences. If you're somebody that has more of a preference for external structure, or you are lower on idea orientation, you prefer a historical reference. There are a lot of good things out of a box, but those that prefer self-structure, none of them are great, because the only thing that's great is how they customize it themselves. So I wouldn't necessarily endorse any one. I've seen some out of the box ones work, and a bunch of the entrepreneurs who I work with are very self-structured. So they'll create their own that ultimately works better for them.
When we talked a few weeks ago, when I was given 5 things I'd never do again and 5 things I would do, it is amazing how many boxes Erik checks on the things that I learned that I would do. I just love that. Like, number 1 was patient ambition, as an example. One of them was a 3 to 5 year strategic planner. In his model, it's the EOS model, where that's 3 to. It's funny, you asked for the 10 year, and he says, "Well, I still look at things in 3 to 5 years." Because 10 years is too long for me. And just that perseverance as an entrepreneur to see this through, see that through, see this recession through, see this time period through, .com crash. 28 years is a long time, Rich.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think, quite honestly, I don't think we met when Erik started this business, and we've known each other for 25 years or so, right? So it's an incredibly long period of time. When you hear him talking about CD-ROMs, and that's where his business started. And the reason why I like the word pivot is he just kept pivoting and pivoting and pivoting and pivoting and pivoting and pivoting and pivoting until he found success for his business. And when I talked in that episode about having a lifestyle business, that yes, you have a business, It pays you a good salary. You're making a good living. You've created a lifestyle business. Crossing over from that lifestyle business to a growth business where you're really creating significant value for the stakeholders, your team, your investors, it's a very difficult thing to do. And if you try and do it in a short period of time and rush it, you're trying to raise capital too quick. Like if Erik tried to raise capital 20 years ago, he wouldn't necessarily be in the position he's in today, I don't believe. Like he really took that slow methodological approach to building his business to achieve that success. And there's very few entrepreneurs that have that patient ambition to do it.
And from what I heard from him, part of what the building in the future needs to include is the acquisition of the right talent. I wish I would have asked the follow-up question when he said something about talent is scarce in the U.S. because I'm not globally educated in terms of work markets in anywhere other than the U.S. But I think that is interesting, that statement that he feels it's restricted here, and that talent was the number one risk. When I asked him, what are some of the risks now? Although it's not new and he could take more hits because he's a bigger ship, it's still the number one thing. And it actually ties back to him saying, we worry now about can we service all the business? We're not worried about can we get it? We're worried about how to service it, which ties back to, do I have enough talent?
Yeah. It would have been great to dive there, because I know, just talking to Erik over the years, talent has been, one of the business's biggest struggle, because as things have changed and we are more in a freelance society, right? Especially in programming and technology, a lot of people have decided, I'm just going to freelance and go on to these websites where I can actually just get work versus work for a company. And that's why I mentioned it too. I was really impressed over the years with the culture he created. Like, PixelMEDIA is a place you want to go work. Really good culture. And the COVID impact of, okay, now it's not an office, now we have 400 people across the globe, was another change he had to make, is how do I take this company culture that's around the pool table or the ping pong table and make it global? I mean, that's quite a task. But it is important. The one thing that would have been cool to talk more about too is, how do you manage a global workforce? Because if talent is scarce in the US and you're going to other countries to bring on talent, that's a skill up in and of itself that it'd be great to learn more about in terms of how that's done.
Gosh, we're identifying a few things we wish we would have asked him about. Maybe there's a follow-up conversation with him, recorded or not. But I'd like to ask him about when he said, culture-wise, and he said, what's the key? People want to work there. And he said, get your core values out there.
Yeah.
And it was during a time that you were trying to go a lightning round with them. But other than putting the values on the wall, I would have loved to have heard, what are some observable behavioral expressions of those values in his business as a result of getting them out there? Like, what does that look like? Because there's something more than he put a nice poster on the wall and put up a ping pong table and that's a great place to work. I'd love to dig deeper into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think, part of it is just being very structured, regimented, having that patient ambition, growing, caring about your people, finding the niche in your business, focusing. And ultimately, if you put in the time, and he even mentioned in this episode, how he got lucky. He started working with Demandware, and all of a sudden, Salesforce buys Demandware. That just didn't happen. I mean, that was 28 years to find, to get luck like that. It takes that perseverance as an entrepreneur to get there. And I think Erik's business and what he's done with it is an excellent role model. Whether you're starting your business today to realize that it's a long game, not a short game, or whether you're in your business today and you're trying to figure out, how do I get to this promised land of having a business that's creating great equity? There's a lot of lessons here to be learned, and I'm very impressed with what he's done. I think he's a good role model in that.